As we've heard already this morning, this topic is near and dear to all of our hearts. And had we forgotten that, the governor of Nebraska has reminded us how much we love Colorado water. From drought work to the work of the anti-speculation work group, this panel aims to answer all of your questions. And we all know these four individuals truly are water experts. This panel is graciously sponsored by Eklund and Hamlin, LLC. Please welcome James Eklund to moderate this discussion.
Well, it's good to be with you. Thank you. We're going to jump right into it here so that we can spend as much time on this important issue as possible. This is the best panel that I've done a lot of these. This is the best one that I've had, certainly in this room, and I've done a ton of presentations and panels in this room over my career. These three individuals are just hands down the best of Colorado agriculture and water rolled into one. And I'm really excited that I get to hear their wisdom and we get to have a discussion and answer any questions that you all have. So let me give really short shrift to their introductions here. It's embarrassing to say so little, but we want to get to the actual topic. So Joe Frank has been a go-to South Platte water expert since before I even dipped my toe in water. He's a lifelong rural Coloradan and has served as the general manager of the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District since 2004. He's held about every title worth holding: chairman of the South Platte Basin Roundtable, president of the Colorado Water Congress, coordinator of the Northeast Colorado Water Cooperative, School of Mines grad. He's winner of Water Leadership Awards. The list goes on, but the highest praise comes from the pen of no other than the late, great Justice Hobbs, who called him an anchor of the South Platte. This one belongs to Pro 15. So if you're here from Pro 15, that's give him a shout. So, okay, Joe Bernal is an agricultural producer on the Western Slope, where I'm from. Over the past year, he and Joe Frank represented agriculture on the water task force that the legislature ordered to produce a report and then promptly ignored an anti-speculation report. Joe is Exhibit A when I say that the sharpest business people I know are in agriculture. Make no mistake, agriculture is hard and he makes it look easy. And Colorado owes him a debt of gratitude for being a strong rural voice. This one belongs to Club 20. All right, yeah, there's the Club 20. Club 20 showed up. All right, Travis Smith is the Western Water Conservation Coordinator for the National Wild Turkey Federation. He has been an exceptionally strong advocate for Colorado water users for, I won't say how long, Travis, but for many decades. Let's just leave it at that. Perhaps partnerships built on trust and respect describe his career, and I'm fortunate to call him a mentor and a friend, and I have a lot of company, by the way, when I say that. Travis has served as superintendent for the San Luis Valley Irrigation District in Colorado Water Congress leadership and on the Colorado Water Conservation Board. 3 different governors saw fit to appoint him to that board. And I was lucky enough to be the director when he was on it, and on the IBCC. He's been appointed to that. Thank goodness they did, because he's a massive reason why we were able to land Colorado's water plan successfully, that General Weiser referenced and others have talked about during your conference. So these people are just a font of information and knowledge. I'm going to shut up and let them give quick presentations on what is going on with respect to water and kind of the issues that they want to bring to your attention from their respective parts of the state, and then we'll go to some Q&A. So without further ado, Joe, do you want to take Joe Frank? We got the Joes, and then the rose between the thorns with Travis. All right.
I guess I'll get this started. So yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. As James mentioned, Joe Frank with the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District. I've been there since 2004 for 18 years. A little bit more about myself. I'm a third generation native Colorado. I grew up actually 8 miles from Nebraska. Don't hold that against me when we start talking about Nebraska's claims here. My mom actually was born and raised in Nebraska as well. I actually grew up on a small dryland farm, so I drove every day to work and school across the irrigated lands of the North Sterling Irrigation District. So I could actually see the difference of what irrigation brought to the valley and to our community. And so it was very impactful for me as a growing up in Northeast Colorado. And then, coming back to Sterling to be able to manage the district, we take pride in protecting and conserving water in the Lower South Platte. So to start, I would be remiss to just, usually I give a pretty long presentation on South Platte history, but I do want to just give a brief history of South Platte. If you remember or know, I guess, Delph Carpenter, who actually helped write the compact with Colorado and Nebraska, as part of the history, would let everyone know in his report that the South Platte wasn't the way it is now. It actually just flowed out of the mountains into the plains and was gone usually by July. And actually, he was quoted as saying that the pioneers as far west as Fort Morgan would have to dig down into the sands to get water for their animals and their livestock. So, it used to be an intermittent stream, a mile wide stream, and things changed, right? What changed that was irrigation, and the development of irrigation in Colorado started in the South Platte Basin from top to bottom, close to the mining communities. We saw direct flow irrigation start, late 1850s, 1860s, 1870s. And as that progressed, people downstream were able to irrigate as well because they were retiming the river. Their inefficiencies actually became benefit to downstream. So as the water seeped through the ditches, not all the water was actually consumed by the crops. They actually filled up an alluvial aquifer, and that aquifer drains into the river, creating a gaining river and water for appropriation further downstream. And actually, Delph proved, and others proved to Nebraska, that we actually make conditions better for them in the summertime in the irrigation season. And that's how they actually have a water right, essentially an 1897 water right in Colorado. We had several plains reservoirs that were built in the 1900s. And then we had the wells that were brought online in the 1930s and through the 70s to tap into that alluvial aquifer. We had West Slope water come over from the Colorado Thompson project as well, and other transbasin projects. These attributes that were created by not just irrigation but other practices, I mentioned return flows. Those are huge benefits to our area. We rely heavily on return flows. In fact, some overall statistics: 1.4 million acre feet come into our basin on average. Snowpack and rainfall, 30,000 acre feet of non-tributary water, 400,000 on average from transbasin water. Yet we divert, on average, over 4 million acre feet a year of surface water and another 500,000 acre feet of groundwater. So you can that sounds like fuzzy math, but that return flow nature is what drives the South Platte Basin. So two real existing issues, current issues that have been issues since I've come on board, and probably for quite some time. Number one, we are over appropriated. It's amazing the amount of the mighty South Platte actually covered, and supplies 4 million people in that basin, 850,000 acres of irrigated agriculture, industry, wildlife, and huge amounts of habitat that benefit from practices of current operations. But we do have shortages, existing shortages, somewhere to the tune of 500,000 acre feet shortages for irrigation and agriculture on average. And in dry years, it's quite a bit more. And then the other real pressure that we have is the growing front range, right? We see the population supposed to be around 6 million people in this basin by 2050. So that is putting pressure for new demands, new supplies, and actually reallocation of existing supplies. We heard earlier about the San Luis project, but we also see a lot of that pressure in the South Platte Basin of what we call buy and dry. And the impacts that has on the basin, but more specifically on the regional communities that rely so heavily on that agriculture and that pressure from buy and dry. So those two issues are hit near and dear to us. Solutions, we're working collaboratively with some front range partners. Parker Water and Sanitation District, we're actually working with in Douglas County to develop some unappropriated water. We have an agreement with them that says that there will be no buy and dry that goes through that project or any third parties that use that water or that project. So that collaboration, I think we can use things like alternative transfers where farmers can lease water as opposed to selling out. And anything we do is not stopping that. We're not saying that you can't sell your water, but we're providing options, hopefully provide options for people, that there's better options out there. So we have challenges, and one of those challenges that was mentioned earlier was that the shock that we all heard last Monday about Nebraska actually claiming a portion of their water in Article 6 of our compact. I agree with A.G. Weiser that we shouldn't panic about that. There's a lot more to come and to understand. If anybody has questions later, we can talk about those. And then we do have a major species mitigation program in central Nebraska that we're contributing to participate in. And actually, I think that becomes an opportunity for us as well. Speaking of opportunities, we talk about collaboration and cooperation with our municipal friends, people across the state, our environmental and recreational community. I think we do a lot of collaboration with Ducks Unlimited, Parks and Wildlife on local projects. Funding is another huge thing that we don't have all these ideas, but it takes money to get these infrastructure projects built, and they're smart projects. I think we need to look at these projects. We need to educate people that storage is not a bad word. It's actually a good word. It can be done very wise. And you look at the benefits of existing storage. I think new storage is going to be more beneficial, and it's going to provide that habitat as well as the solutions that I'll pick up one fair share of time.
No, you did a good job. And we'll go to Travis next. And I forgot to mention. Whoa. Turn mine off.
Oh, turn mine off.
Oh, turn Joe's off. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I think we got it.
No, we didn't. Instructions up here on how to run the mic. And, written instructions is kind of dangerous.
Travis, you got to give me the free applause line. You're action 22. So if you're action 22, all right, yeah.
All right, and it's a pleasure to be here to speak with this group. I have a number of friends here from San Luis Valley that I recognize, and they'll be fact checking my comments here. But whenever I go to a water meeting, I want to take it makes me thirsty. So if you have water in front of you, take a big drink. And then, do you ever wonder where the water comes from? And I was trying to find here, it comes from, I think it's from Walmart, but it doesn't say exactly where it comes from. And I think that's one of our challenges. So water, there's so much that divides us, but I think water and the current challenges that we have, could be the great, the common element that brings us together. And I know that might be a little lofty this morning when we're talking about the current status of water. Listen, Colorado has been a an arid, dry place for a long time. Colorado's been defined by water scarcity. And the Attorney General spoke about Colorado really is written in water. Our life is written in water. So maybe we need a little refresher about where we live and what we've become accustomed to. And when you look out the window, that is a contrast from where I come from. And I live just south of Del Norte in the San Luis Valley. It is definitely rural. And so we have this urban-rural divide. And how do we meet all of our challenges? Water. Rio Grande has been over-appropriated since the 1890s. I am not the expert on the Arkansas Basin, but I would suggest the Arkansas Basin is very over-appropriated. There's compact issues, but we have opportunities with the challenges on water scarcity. First of all, we have competing demands with an increased population. I carry the executive summary of the Colorado Water Plan, which has James Eklund's fingerprints all over it. But it talks about the importance of agriculture. It talks about the importance of a vibrant economy, and that's what we have all around the state, especially on the Front Range. But it talks about the importance of recreation, open spaces, the environment. And in the opening statement of the Colorado Water Plan, it says, we love Colorado. What do we want it to look like 30 years from now? What is Colorado going to look like? And so that's the challenge. Agriculture, I would say, voices, rural voices, and the theme for today's conversation is rural Colorado's voice is small, but it's very important. And I'm encouraged by seeing a full room here today about, so how can rural Colorado have a united voice? Whether you're farm or ranch or recreation or land development, but rural Colorado needs to really start working together. And then I would suggest this urban-rural divide. Now this might sound a little bit goofy, but we need each other. When I think about rural Colorado, it needs a vibrant economy on the Front Range that's buying the produce. So I use this analogy about if there wasn't good high-paying jobs on the I-25 corridor and people had disposable income to go and recreate in Palisade, and I have a lot of family in the Grand Valley, to ride overpriced bikes and drink overpriced wine, it kind of draws us together. And I have a lot of friends on the West Slope that talk about not one, and as long as there's green grass in the urban area, not one more drop. Well, I've learned a lot from my friends in the urban area. Patty Wells from Denver Water talks about urban agriculture. What is she talking about? Urban agriculture. But she said, think about what Denver would look like if you didn't have green spaces, if you didn't have trees, if you didn't have big playgrounds for our children. Steel and concrete make people feel kind of mean. And so it kind of changed my point of view thinking about urban agriculture in this urban-rural divide. I am concerned about our representation of the legislature. As more people come to Colorado and they settle in the I-25 corridor, we have very few representatives and state senators that are actually tied to agriculture. One of them, we're hoping was going to be here today, Senator Simpson. So how do we make sure that our voice is heard? And I would say that it's understanding our rich heritage. And now we have a changing population that really doesn't understand. Colorado, in my mind, was developed around water development, water scarcity. And Joe Frank spoke to what has happened on the South Platte is water development, diverters, and the return flows and the rich economy that comes out of that. And so now I would just suggest, and I want to let Joe on my right speak a little bit, the idea that we have spent the last 130 years of water development developing new water supplies. And I think we're entering into a new era of water allocation. And even water sharing, now that's kind of a scary word, but it's not enough to just go look somewhere else for new water supplies. I live in the San Luis Valley and I'm concerned about the latest water export. It's not enough to go somewhere else to look for new supplies. I think we need to be talking about how are we using the resources we have now in the best way and reallocate. One more thought about my experience on the Water Conservation Board about ag efficiencies. If you want to see ag efficiencies, you come to the San Luis Valley and how groundwater is used. Ag efficiencies are very productive, but that also leads to increased consumptive use. And then you lose a lot of the other benefits. I have a surface irrigated small ranch on a small tributary, and I think about all the benefits of what flood irrigation means for wildlife and return flows and late season return flows and wildlife corridors. So James, there's many challenges and many controversies, but I look forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Travis. We'll go to Joe Bernal from the Grand Valley.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Bernal. Together with my son and family, I'm a fourth generation agricultural producer on the western edge of Colorado in Mesa County in a place called Loma. We have some wonderful bike trails there. I would like to first thank all of you for being here and listening and giving me the opportunity to share with you some of the issues and concerns of rural communities, particularly the water crisis in Colorado. Like most of you know, I'm living here in Colorado because it's a beautiful place. It provides me and my family with a good living and it's home. We're all neighbors. Our cities and farms, our ranches and towns. All Colorado are interconnected because of our natural resources, our industry, and our water and our state's beauty. Currently, Colorado's water is distributed under the prior appropriation system. Over 150 years ago, our forefathers showed tremendous foresight in the creation of a fair and equitable system for the distribution of Colorado's limited resources. So working within those laws should be how the potential crisis is addressed. We have been discovering in the past few years that there's a change in our state's hydrology, less snowpack. We have a diminishing water supply and an ever-growing population. Our reservoirs that help us to deliver our obligation to the lower basin states of 7.5 million acre-feet annually are getting lower and lower. At this rate, in less than 2 years, the elevation at Lake Powell will be below minimum power generation levels, which will trigger many consequences due to the lack of power revenues, among other consequences. We are facing a threat of compact administration should we not meet those obligations in the lower basin states. There's the uncertainty of the renegotiation of the interim guidelines governing the operations of Lake Powell and Meade. There is increasing pressure from Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment on imposing strict regulations on water flowing through the drain systems in our valley with no baseline to know what, if any, is agriculture's impact on the water quality. We on the western slope are continuously being looked at as a source for trans-mountain diversions east to the Front Range and west as a source to raise levels in Lake Powell and Lake Meade. Some of the reservoirs in Colorado which are not fully depleted annually are dangerously low. Some of the most concerning controversies we face on the Western Slope and on the Colorado River are regions, cities, and municipalities with junior water rights looking at our senior water as a source for their future growth. Officials and leaders attempting to create laws that artificially control water value and promote development in semi-arid or arid areas. Proposed laws that would give an exemption from paying fair market value for the resources to develop should some ag water be sold. And people, entities, and voters who do not own water rights looking to change prior appropriation laws, which would be a disaster in itself. Additionally, agriculture and rural communities are being attacked by proposed radical legislation. These initiatives include restrictions on our ability to manage our livestock, restrictions on good farming practices to apply pesticides safely, and also to reintroduce predators and push to impede predator management, causing harm to our livestock. All of these would have dire consequences on our ability to produce abundant food and on the ability of the next generation of farmers and ranchers in Colorado. We have outside entities purchasing water that may want to transfer some of those water rights from agriculture to municipal use. There is a threat of permanent buy and dry of water from rural communities, which would be catastrophic to those communities, like which occurred on the Arkansas River and in Powell County. On another front, legislators created the bill, SB 20-48, that directed the Division of Natural Resources to seed a group of water experts, attorneys, and water right holders, including myself and Mr. Frank, whose task was to study whether or not to strengthen Colorado's anti-speculation law. Our work group came back with a resounding no. We do not recommend any changing of the law. Legislators ignored that recommendation and charged forward with an anti-speculation bill, SB 22-029, that would create a law that could produce negative consequences on hardworking farmers and ranchers and rural communities who have been stewards of the lands and waters for generations. My hope for the future is that citizens and leaders of Colorado will work together through statewide collaboration, stakeholder involvement, and water right holders' input to solve our current and future water needs. I believe that we will all realize that we cannot maintain the beauty and appeal of Colorado while drying up its rural communities for the sake of urban growth. There are alternatives, ideas and solutions that can and should be explored, such as desalinization in lower basin states, the reduction of use by lower basin states to their current apportionment of the Colorado River, the exploration to the east by Front Range municipalities for a source of water that may be more abundant, and control of urban growth by making development pay a fair price for water that is already in limited supply. Water for public health and safety is necessary and should be a priority, but this can be achieved through good planning and not always at the expense of rural agricultural communities. Conscientious leaders will need to look beyond the low-hanging fruit of nearby agricultural water and find ways to conserve and discover new sources while keeping Colorado green. After all, what we do with water and agriculture is we make food.
Well said.
All right. So you heard them just skim the surface of the issues that we all face as Coloradans, and a front row seat in each of their parts of the state. And I guess I'll kick this off, and then please, if you're ready for get your questions ready, and we'll have time for those. But right off the bat, you referenced Joe Bernal, the legislation that Senate Bill 2209, I think that it's directed at doing exactly what you told the legislature not to do. And I'm wondering if there is Travis talked about a united voice for rural Colorado, a united voice for agriculture in Colorado. What does that look like as the legislature moves forward on this and any other bill that might be without having consulted rural Colorado about what it would benefit from? Any of you? Yeah, it's free for all.
Well, I think support from Club 20, Action 22, Approach 15 is an easy start right there. The testimony, Colorado Water Congress State Affairs Committee, they take action on this legislation next Monday. So it's an opportunity to weigh in from a rural voice about your concerns about, this isn't an anti-speculation bill in my mind. It's an anti-competition bill that limits agriculture's most valuable resource, and it's the water. So I would just throw out, it'd be great for these three groups to weigh in on SB 029.
I'd like to say our association, our ditch company, we have a good leader in our association now, and we monitor legislation, proposed legislation, and we have a person here in Denver who helps get our position and our voice out. So we would prefer collaborating a little more with other regions than we do, but we are taking a lead in opposing, making official statements that we are opposing certain legislation or supporting.
I'll add to that. I want to point out one mistake that Joe made on or talked about on that report. We actually did have one recommendation, and I helped draft that one recommendation. And it's the very last two sentences of that report, and it said, if you as a legislature decide to move forward or even think about in future legislation, you need to have a broad stakeholder engagement process. Testimony on the House Ag floor, I don't think it's broad stakeholder engagement. And my hope was always, and not just this bill, in any bill, that there is that communication, that stakeholder engagement, reaching out. I think, others can do a better job. We can do a better job of reaching out ourselves to make sure our voices are heard. We also are part of the lobbying group in our, and we're, I think this afternoon, we're going to talk about this and probably take a position. Our district itself took a position against this bill. And I think it would be good for, like Joe mentioned, our groups to communicate across the state on our positions when it comes to this bill. But I do think we need to have more and more of that stakeholder. In today's world with Zoom and people, not getting out and meeting as much, I think I'm hoping to get back into that collaboration.
Now, one more for me, and then we'll kick it to anybody that has a question on the audience here. But if you go out into Denver and into the Front Range here, and you ask people where their water comes from, they could say it comes from the tap, and their food comes from the grocery store, and their water comes from the tap, and that's just the end of it. I mean, that's what they know, and it's not necessarily their fault that's what they've been told. That's what they've been left to believe. If we in the rural parts of the state that know what a water right is, that's what we adopted in 1876, was a system of private property rights that it does have a value. A lot of people that aren't familiar with that think, well, it should be like air. It should be like, we all have to have it to live. So it should be treated in common. And maybe we shouldn't have these senior water rights and junior water rights. Water should just be for everybody. And the problem with that is it disregards the asset class that a lot of people in this room have come to depend on as sometimes, like Travis said, their most valuable performing asset. And so that brings me to my question for this group, which is, what do we do about, like you said, Travis, it used to be half of the people under that gold dome were from rural Colorado, and that's not the case anymore. Now only a handful are. And we're lucky to have champions like Senator Simpson and just a handful of others, but they're not the majority anymore. What do we do to get through to a legislature that ignored the report that you helped put together and make sure that they understand that there is an entire part of this state, the vast majority of the land surface of this state, that the water does not come from the tap. It doesn't come from the faucet. It comes from a water right that has to be administered and managed. How do we tackle that one?
I can start. Yes, wrap this up, but I do think education is key. I shout out to Representative McCormick, who actually came out in our district and toured our area. Several others have done the same thing in the past. I think getting people out to the rural communities and understanding the water, what it's used for, how it's used, I think is key. Education, putting on, groups like this, and just getting that word out there, understanding the importance of priority system and what it does. We are an arid state. It provides water in scarce times. If you know your certainty. In our area, as I mentioned, I don't know how much water we would have if the priority system went away. It would all, obviously, people talk about the public trust doctrine, highest and best use. What is that? Somebody determining what that would be a huge, first of all, I legal battles from here on out. But I just think we need to understand why get people educated why the priority system was put into our Constitution in an arid West, and in the fact that there's benefits across the board that come from the priority system and a regular system that were built the way they were, and there's huge other benefits that come across from that. So education is key, and we need to do it.
Well, the only thing I'd like to add is that we in the Grand Valley, we feel like our backs against the wall, and with the lower basin states and Trans Mountain diversions. And it sounded a little bit like a downer compared to my two gentlemen on my left, but it's been eye-opening for me to listen to our Attorney General Phil Weiser. And what Joe Frank says, I think collaboration and knowing that we're neighbors here in Colorado and seeing each other's regions and knowing each other's problems, I feel like that could help us more in solving some of these issues. And that's my takeaway from today.
Fantastic.
Just my observation about agriculture is we're so darn independent that we, and we're out working. So it's hard to engage unless you have an entity. Can you hear me, Mike? Yeah. or get back a little bit. Just my observation is that here's an interesting statistic. It's a little bit dated. 98% of people in Colorado have never stepped on a farm or a ranch. And I've heard the 2% are involved in agriculture, but 98% of Coloradans. So we've gotten so far away from the farm and the ranch that we really don't understand what the benefit is. But I made a challenge to the Colorado Cattlemen's Farm Bureau and CAWA about a month ago. We need to start talking to each other. And I put that same challenge out to our rural counties and county commissioners and CCI that because of our independence, sometimes it's good being 4 hours away from Denver. And I appreciate that, but we have to engage, and we have to be involved and stay vigilant. A lot of water entities have the resources to designate someone to go and be involved in Colorado Water Congress and be involved in the legislature. But the smaller ag groups, they don't. And so I applaud Club 20, Action 22, and Pro 15. Just this forum right here and being able to have enough information. If you need more information on this particular legislation, here's a plug for the Colorado Water Congress. The winter conference is next week, but you have access to their website for a score sheet on all the legislation that's coming through that's water related. It's a great resource if you want to find out what's going on. The other challenge for rural, for me to go and testify, and I have, I don't know how many times over the last 40 years. It's a long drive from Del Norte early in the morning to get to an ag committee meeting that might be postponed at 10 o'clock. And now in the virtual world, you know, it's more of a challenge to be able to go there and testify in person. And so we have another obstacle, which I hope goes away here, but it's worth engaging. So I'll quit right there.
Hey, that's great, Travis. Thank you. All right. We've got, yes, sir.
So just a couple things. This is not a new issue. The legislators not having a knowledge of water. Senator Simpson and Senator Sonnenberg are probably the only two that actually have a real work knowledge out of the 100. And before that, it was Senator Brophy and Representative Sonnenberg. So this is not a new thing. But my question actually kind of goes to the what are we going to do now? But maybe more of a historical perspective. I had a front row seat for the buy and dry in Crowley County. That's where I grew up. That's where I was born. I got to see that firsthand. So my question is, we talk about stopping the buy and dry, are there other examples? I mean, Crowley County, this is a 50-year-old story now. And so what has happened in that 50 years that it hasn't occurred elsewhere like it did in Crowley County? And is there something that can be done proactively, legislatively, or whatever? We talked about stopping a lot of these things. 29, I'm not sure what that is. I haven't seen it yet, but where do we go from here? And what has been done to proactively stop some of these things, and what can be done? We start talking about the asset aspect of it. We start talking about rights and property rights. That's why Crowley County farmers sold. They got a pretty penny out of that. And but how do we balance those things? That's.
Can I just ask you one clarifying question? On the Crowley County example, the history that I've always been taught is that the collapse of the sugar beet market really perpetuated that. Well, what are we going to do? We got to make some money. Maybe selling this is the best thing to do. And there was an economic driver that kind of kicked in there. When you heard General Weiser talk about beef, that's my family's in the cow-calf operation. They are absolutely front row seat for them on this processing monopolistic behavior, anti-competitive behavior that we're seeing in the beef industry. So I guess my question to help us chew on an answer for you would be, do you think that, is that accurate, I guess? Did the sugar beet industry collapse kind of pave the way or make the ground fertile, so to speak, for buy and dry in Crowley County?
Sure did, but it was only, I mean, it was a part of it.
Okay.
It was only a part of it. And the closing of the factory in Sugar City certainly did add to the causation of all of that. But by the time, even then, I mean, that was back in the 60s that happened. And so you get into the 70s and the buy and dry, and how that progressed on through the years. Everything was still, land had transformed to other uses. besides sugar beets in Crowley County. But there was still that value there that they needed to get out from under, and the contributing factor of the sugar beets collapse was maybe one of the bigger original contributing factors, but not the only factor.
Gotcha. Any thoughts to offer?
Yeah, I've got lots of options. I probably can't hit them all, but I think one thing that's out of our control from a water perspective is the other dynamics. You know, a strong, healthy ag economy in that realm and across the board, I think is something that, you know, maybe the farmer wants to stay in farming as, you know, because it's you know, economically viable, and it's viable for the community as well. So we have tons of feedlots and dairies, you know, that are doing well, that are, you know, relying on the irrigated crops as a food source. But you're right, it is a balancing act. It's a huge balancing act because water is a property right. We're not going to do anything or shouldn't do anything to stop it and say, hey, you can't do this. And in the South Platte Basin, we see, you know, it's not as evident because you haven't seen a lot of the dry up actually occur, but you have you know, plenty of places where entities have bought the ground with the intent to dry it up in the future and use that as a municipal supply. So, you know, I think the other piece is the education. Can we educate and find other solutions out there? You know, like I mentioned, the project we're working on is an option. I think more, you know, the more we can provide other options, you know, educate people that, you know, efficiency at the municipal level, you know, it's kind of how we grow as a front range basin. We all know that those urban landscapes that's what really consumes water at the municipal level, as opposed to, you know, Travis drinks that water and goes to the bathroom, flushes, and, you know, we can return for it, right? So we know that just the efficiency and how people use water is key as well. And the more efficient we can use the water as a municipal setting, the better as well. So there's a lot of things, I think, all part of the water plan, you know, getting out there and getting that education. But you're right. I mean, stopping it is not something that, you know, I think we're going to do. It's going to be something that we can try to manage through and provide other alternatives.
These water transfers from ag to municipal has been going on for 130 years. And I'm surely not suggesting that legislation that diminishes the property rights of water right owners is effective. I think what the water plan suggests is to look at other alternatives rather than buy and dry. And there are a number of other alternatives out there. But the example of water in the right place, water rights in Southwest Colorado probably don't end up in the metro area just because of the physical obstacles that are there. But I think it's more of the public perception that what a water right is, the importance of agriculture. There's this payment for ecosystem services, which is an interesting concept about, is there a way to incentivize irrigation and not just be a subsidy? There's the benefits that Colorado derives from irrigated agriculture. And the truth is, our food is still pretty cheap in spite of what we've seen over the last 12 months. My wife tells me it's changing quickly each time you go to the grocery store, but our food is really relatively pretty cheap, and our water for domestic use. And I would just suggest that in the metro area, people pay more for their dish bill than they do for their water bill. So I appreciate that question. Buy and dry, that's probably not the best, and we use the Crowley County example to come up with alternative ag transfers, or the super ditch concept, or what Aurora has proposed. And you know know much more about what's gone on. Here's another statistic. A third of the irrigated ground in the Arc Basin has already been dried up and the water's been transported. Is that pretty accurate? Yeah. All right, thanks for the question.
You good, Joe?
I'm good.
All right. All right. All right. We're getting close to the end. I'm getting the sign to wrap up from Christian, but I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial just to end, just to spice it up a little. Yeah, just to spice it up a little. So as the headwater state, Colorado has led, and Joe Frank just mentioned this in his intro, that we've led on interstate water issues. We're the headwater state. 18 downstream states in the country of Mexico get their water from us and your snowpack. And Delph Carpenter from Greeley saw wisdom in doing something different than applying the doctrine of prior appropriation across state lines, because he knew that all the senior water right holders would be down in LA or Vegas, or, well, Vegas wasn't very big back then, but New Mexico, or, you know, you name it. And said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And we got this interstate compact doctrine that we applied. And so we've long been, ever since Delph Carpenter started us down this path, where we've got 9 interstate compacts now, 2 equitable apportionment decrees with the U.S. Supreme Court. And we've been leading on interstate water issues, but votes of no confidence, so to speak. I think that's the best thing you can call what Governor Ricketts from Nebraska is doing. So you've got out to the west, out to Joe, just across the border from Joe, Bernal, Utah's mobilizing to protect and defend its Colorado River apportionment. They just started up an authority and funded it to like the tune of $500 million to protect Utah's interests on the Colorado River. To the east, we've been talking about Nebraska dusting off portions of the South Platte River Compact that have never been used to protect and defend its water supplies. To the south, New Mexico and Texas continue to feud over the Rio Grande River. What should Colorado's water leaders, you included, panel, be doing in the face of these challenges? Because it feels like that vote of no confidence is real, that people aren't just deferring to the great state of Colorado anymore on these water issues. Would you agree with that? And what do we do about it if you do?
I don't know if it's a vote of no confidence. I think these states are no different than our state. Right? They're looking at their own supplies. They have their own needs, and I'm not panicking yet on the Nebraska issue, as President mentioned. That is provision in the compact. There's a whole lot of things that we still need to unfold and figure out what's going on. We don't even know what the plans are. But I would say that if that provision is actually comes, and gets built, it's not going to hurt the Front Range. It's not going to hurt existing supplies or new development above the Washington County line, because it's really going to impact existing irrigated agriculture. The exact thing that the governor of Nebraska mentioned would help in Nebraska, but it would actually impact us down there. So, but I think the dialogue needs to be had, between the states, between the water users in each state. I think that gives us an opportunity to not just reach out amongst ourselves, but out to other states as well, and talk and see what their issues are and how we can resolve it. It may be worth it. Hopefully not.
I think it's really important that Colorado line up and not have a perceived, the perception from downstream states that we don't have a plan forward. And I think that was the genesis of the Colorado Water Plan. Recognizing that we got more people, we got more demand, but to really lead the way that Colorado has in the past. And it depends on the current administration and what their view is and what they think the top issues are. But I think Colorado needs to get its house in order first to have a clear message, speak with one voice to the downstream states. One comment about the compacts, it provides certainty. The Rio Grande's been under compact administration, active administration since 1968. You look at the economy that's there in the ag, in spite of the current challenges, but compacts are not the end of the world. Compact administration is not the end of the world, but it's important that how we're viewed from the downstream states, infighting about what is the highest and best use of water, and all those issues that maybe we could have a follow-up at the next summit that you have.
I'd just like to add that I think Colorado Waters are up to the task. I think in the last few years, I've been to more and more meetings and conferences and finding that we're coming together. We heard from the UCRC director, we heard from the CWC director. We are talking about it. We have eyes on legislation and we are coming together and we are well aware of the renegotiation of the interim guidelines, which governs the leveling of Lake Powell and Meade. And I think this summer we've slowed our release from Lake Powell. So I think we're making a difference. And I think we are doing a good job. And I think we can be better. And I think we will.
Awesome. A note of optimism to end on. Thank you very much. Hand for the panel, if you don't mind.
So we will have about a 5-minute break, but the governor is speaking at 11 o'clock. So please get back to your seats and get seated.